What's going on, everybody? Happy 4th of July, and welcome to another edition of the Gators Online Show. We're going to celebrate America today with a great show, but it's going to be a quick show. And, we know you've got a lot to do, so we're going to kind of roll through this stuff pretty fast, but make sure we have an informative 30 or so minutes for you. I'm Keith Niebuhr of Gators Online. As always, I'm joined by senior Gators Online reporter Zach Albaverdi. Zach, happy 4th of July, man. This is the big one. This is my favorite holiday, but we got a lot to talk about. So let's get rolling. Of course, We always start every show. Sorry for the stumbling here. We start every show with an ad read, and it's a big one. It's a big show sponsor. So take it away, Zach.
Absolutely. We are less than 2 months away from the 2025 season. That's where you can see the Florida Gators rocking this ball right here when they take the field against Long Island University. And you can get your hands on this ball if you head over to biggameusa.com and use the code Gators Online. You can get 10% off your entire order and free shipping for a limited time. The Gators designed this ball with Big Game USA to ensure they're comfortable with it, so it's truly one of a kind. Start your collection of Florida's official game balls today. Perfect for tailgates, autographs from your favorite Gators, or gifts, and the code works on any football. Snap yours today at biggameusa.com/Gators.
All right, Zach, I don't know why I always laugh when we say they're playing Long Island. We were always told that the 12-game schedule was going to mean more elite games, and you get games like this. All right, so let's get rolling. One of the first things we wanted to talk about today is assessing Florida's defensive line and Florida's defensive line recruiting and where things are headed. So, Zach, take it away. What do you want to tell us about the Florida defensive line right now? Because games are won and lost in the trenches. Every old school football person will tell you that. So what do we want to start with here?
Yeah, obviously, Florida's on a roll right now in recruiting. It dates all the way back to June, and they landed a big commitment this past week. And Guervil, who, based on our reporting, he has been one of the top targets for the Gators. And, Blake Alderman and Corey Bender have both reported that. I was actually told this past week that he, despite being, outside of the top 100 on most sites, I was told that Guervil was actually near the top of Florida's overall recruiting board, regardless of position. So this is a guy that they wanted from the get-go. Defensive line obviously is a very big need for the Gators in this recruiting cycle. And then just on this roster right now, that is the one spot where it's probably the weakest link. They have some bodies there. They got some numbers. They just don't have the proven depth, and then they don't necessarily have the ideal size at the nose tackle position. And a lot of that has to do with being unable to replace Desmond Watson and Cam Jackson this offseason. They tried to get some guys from the transfer portal, didn't work out. So really, looking at their defensive line, I think this get with Guervil was huge for Florida. Obviously, he's the guy that's going to come in and play that nose spot.
Well, Zach, what's interesting about him is he does have, we're talking about Kendall Guervil, 4-star defensive lineman, just outside the top 100 of national recruits, top 15 defensive lineman from Fort Myers, Florida. What they really like about him isn't just that he's really good. Obviously, he's got all the skills. He's got position versatility. So he's 6'4.5". He's 325 pounds, and it's good weight. I've been near him a few times. It's good weight, so he can go up on that if he needs to. He can play the nose position with his width, right? Or he can play just the other defensive line position, which Florida calls the end, but it's really kind of that 4-eye.
D-tackle,
yeah. Yeah, exactly. The guy right next to the nose, the guy you want as your penetrator. And he can play that because he's got great quickness for his size, that huge hands, 10.5-inch hands, and an 83.5-inch wingspan, which is kind of like an offensive tackle wingspan. So he can be the wide guy at the nose to take on a couple blockers if he needs to, or he can move inside based on situation, based on need. Maybe you've got a guy hurt. Maybe you've got a guy that is out of breath in the third quarter. Hey, we need to slide Kendall over and get this guy a breather. So there's a lot of things you can do with him. Florida beat out. We need to point this out.
Yeah.
Zach, I always say this. It's not necessarily about your ranking. It's who you beat, because there have been schools that I covered that were beating Alabama for 4 and 5 stars, and they were winning. And then toward the end, they were beating Arkansas and NC State for 4 stars. It's a different kind of 4-star. Kendall Guervil could have picked Georgia. He could have picked Texas. And obviously FSU tried to make a run late. So a lot of times, people say, well, why is this guy not ranked higher? He's got 62 offers. Well, sometimes that kid couldn't commit to all 62 schools, let's say. Who could you really commit to? Well, we know that Kendall Guervil was a major, major target for Texas. In fact, they thought they had him all but wrapped up just 2 weeks ago. So a huge, huge win for Florida for a priority guy, not just on their board, but on the boards of Texas, FSU, Georgia, and many other schools. So an elite pickup, a guy that can play a lot of different positions. And like you said, Zach, they don't have a ton of bodies on the defensive line. And, if you're Kendall Guervil, I'm sure he's a defensive lineman, Zach. I'm sure the NIL situation is going to be pretty good for him. Those guys command top dollar. But if you're looking beyond that, and he says, okay, what does Florida have coming back and what is Florida losing? Well, Caleb Banks is a senior, right?
Yeah.
And some of the other guys are older.
Brian Taylor, too.
That's right. So he is at least, Kendall Guervil we're speaking of, at least going to be in the rotation and a heavy part of the rotation as a true freshman.
Yeah.
Because they need bodies, and 3, position versatility. So it's a win-win here. He's going to get on the field early, and Florida absolutely needs him.
And as you know, Keith, it was looking a little dicey there with D-line recruiting before that commitment, right?
Well, they've got another commitment, J.J. Perez. And look, we're recording this early morning, 4th of July. He's currently committed to Florida. He's going to have an announcement later in the day, and you may be watching this after the announcement. So we'll see how that plays out. But look, that's been one.
We expect him to go to Ohio State.
That's right. And look, maybe we'll be wrong, and maybe he'll end up with Florida. But we expect him to go to Ohio State. Correct. And so that doesn't leave, but only Kendall Guervil left is your true defensive line commits in the class. Now you have an end, Jeraylin McCoy, a 4-star from Mississippi. He's in that 260-pound range. So he could maybe play the F position, which is currently occupied by Tariq Sapp, or potentially he could grow into a defensive tackle 3 technique kind of guy. But again, nobody in the middle. And then, Zach, you just had the situation with Stephon Shivers, the true freshman. You'll talk about that. No longer on the roster, not currently on the roster. And then DeAndre Robinson was a guy that had shown great promise as a true freshman, and he's transferred to North Carolina. So I'm doing all your work here, Zach. I'm sorry.
No, because I want to get your thoughts on this too.
Yeah,
it was also getting dicey because the other guys that had came off the board, right? I mean, you look at the last few weeks. Yeah. Johnson came off the board to Georgia, Cleveland to Texas, Carey to Georgia. Like, it was starting to look like, who are they going to get?
Yeah. And Preston Carey was a guy that committed to Georgia over Florida and Auburn just a couple of days ago. He's had the interesting commitment ceremony that lasted over an hour. And, actually, everybody's dogging the kid, and he's a great interview, and he's been great to us. So I'm not going to sit here and make fun of him. But it was a long ceremony. But you lost him to Georgia. James Johnson, who's originally from the Fort Myers area, now playing down in Miami, he committed to Georgia. Now, he's a little smaller. He's not an inside guy. But Vodney Cleveland, who Florida lost to Texas, was an inside guy. He was a guy that, that could play that nose tackle position. So, it had been. Florida's going to war with some of the big boys. Again, lost Vodney Cleveland to Texas, lost Johnson and Preston Carey to Georgia, but they got the big win in Guervil. So, again, it's a big win for a multitude of reasons. Again, he's going to play early, position versatility, very high ceiling. I mean, this is a guy that we will tell you Florida believes is all conference ability by year 2 or year 3. They believe he's a true difference maker. Preston Carey, very good. James Johnson, very good. Vodney Cleveland, very good. Out of those 3, maybe Johnson would be the guy that you would think would be the difference maker. But Kendall Guervil is a guy that Florida absolutely thought.
Now, we should note, too, and at least my understanding, Guervil was the number 1 D lineman on their board.
Yeah, and that's easy to say after the fact, but we've been hearing that for quite a while, quite frankly. And in fact, just a few weeks ago, Blake Alderman and I were up in Gainesville covering one of those recruiting weekends, and we were told by some people in the know that, hey, look, I'd love to get Rodney Cleveland, a very good player out of Birmingham who committed to Texas, but that Guervil was the guy. And that was before this all even shook out. In fact, at the time, a lot of people thought Guervil was Texas bound.
Yeah, so that's right.
Credit the Florida staff, credit defensive line coach Gerald Chapman, and also credit NIL. We're not privy to all the numbers, but obviously
you don't beat Texas if your NIL ain't in order.
The funny thing is, and look, Texas has done a great job recruiting the last few years. And people have always said, hey, Texas has got the money. Their NIL's rolling. Well, now some Texas fans are like complaining that Florida, they beat them because of NIL. They say, well, you can't have it both ways, guys. But look, that's just recruiting. We joke about this all the time, Zach. People just don't want to kind of admit what it is now. They still want to look. It's a lot about relationships. It's a lot about playing time, player development, all that stuff. But it's a lot about NIL. We might as well be honest with it. These guys are professional athletes.
Especially when Florida's doing it right.
Correct. And by the way, if the problem is if you're not getting guys, people just assume you're living in poverty. Well, different schools have different values for different guys. I mean,
correct.
You have a different need, so you're going to put a higher value on a guy.
Well, for instance, get your kind of off topic, but the Henderson guy that just committed to LSU, right. we heard that LSU upped the bag. Did Florida maybe feel like because of how stacked they are at edge, that's one of their strongest positions on the team, that maybe they didn't need to pay what LSU was willing to pay for that specific player? Doesn't mean he's not worth it or that Florida doesn't have the money. They're just not in that position where they need to do that. Yeah,
Trent Henderson, 4-star edge from Pensacola Catholic, chose LSU over Florida this week. But you're right. In Florida, when he officially visited Florida a couple of weeks ago, went into that visit with LSU in the lead, came out of that visit with Florida in the lead, and we were told Florida was pretty comfortable with the offer, the NIL situation. Well, our guys, our camp, Corey Bender, Blake Alderman, they heard that maybe there was some disappointment, as it turns out, from the Henderson side. They might have wanted more from Florida. LSU apparently came in and satisfied what they were looking for, and that's fine. That's part of the game. That's nothing to complain about. It is what it is. But I will tell you that Preston Carey, the word is, people say, okay, well, Florida lost him to Georgia, Auburn lost him to Georgia. Georgia must have come in. Sometimes guys will take less. That was one where we have been told he might have taken less. And sometimes people do that. What did they tell us about DJ Lagway?
Dallas Wilson took less to come to Florida than Oregon.
What about DJ Lagway? Wasn't the word that Texas A&M came in late, big? We don't know that for a fact, but that's what we were told by.
Pretty sure Auburn offered LJ McCray more to flip, and he didn't as well.
Probably.
So it happens.
Yeah, it happens every day. And I think you can't. There's two sides. As people say, well, Florida, why do we get beat on some of these guys? Do we not have any money? And again, Zach, I always go back to last year. You don't flip 10 to 12 guys in the last month if you don't have some money, okay?
Yeah.
But they have their system and what they will pay and won't pay guys. I mean, look, TJ Searcy, a guy that was on the team, asked for a big number, and they looked at the numbers and they didn't think it was going to work. And
you look at their edge room. They're stacked. You look at their edge room. They're stacked.
Yeah.
Exactly. I think another reason Guervil was important, Keith, and you can speak to this, there's also not a lot of other D-line targets out there. If they didn't get Guervil, it's Stone and who else? Yeah,
Valden Stone is a kid from Sweden that's visited he's taken about 100 college visits. They're heavily involved in him. Now, I will tell you that if Kendall Guervil was number one on the board, Valden Stone, and I hope I'm pronouncing his name right, might be number two, and maybe even a close number two. He's a legit guy, big guy, probably has some of that position versatility as well inside. Who are the schools involved? Some of the same ones we just talked about. Georgia, Auburn, Texas is sort of in there. Oklahoma's in there. Nebraska is in there.
I was going to say,
This guy, look, when you have an elite defensive tackle, defensive lineman like Kendall Guervil or Valden Stone, and they believe these two guys, they being colleges, these two guys are grown men, okay? There's always going to be a war to get those guys. So Florida, you're right, Zach. The board is not particularly deep. Florida had to get somebody. And I'll never forget, somebody once told me, said when a big program is down, that's when you got to look out for them. And I don't think Florida's down, but I'm saying they've been down this cycle with defensive line recruiting. That's when you're going to come in big. That's when you're going to put everything into a kid, whether it's NIL or a staff working them or working the parents or making them feel everything. Working them doesn't just mean throwing money at them. It's everything. And Florida probably looked at the situation and said, there aren't a ton of options here. We got to get Kendall Guervil. And they did. But Valden Stone, if you could somehow add him, and again, that's a recruitment that could go in 50 different directions right now. But Florida came away with a good one here. Now you go into the season, and so what's the next step for Florida? Well, Valden Stone will have an announcement sometime this summer. Regardless of what happens there, Florida will then put all its efforts in August into getting the team ready for the season and then jumping into the season. About 3-4 games into the high school season, new film starts coming in, all right? And the Florida staff, which is huge, is constantly evaluating. And they will find new guys. And they are big believers, Zach. A lot of schools have gone away from this, and I think Florida's come back to this. Florida believes senior evaluations mean something. Guys are making big leaps. They're 16, 17 years old. That's what's happened in recent years is Zach's staffs have said, hey, we got our commitments, man. We're good to go. Well, that's great, but a kid could be here that you've got committed, and another kid that's uncommitted could totally pass by that kid 100%. In the fall. And that's what Florida's done the last 2 years. And they're very comfortable with the evaluations and some of the late evaluations they made. Now, it didn't work out at Florida. He left the program, but Gregory Smith, the safety, was one of them. He didn't leave the program because it wasn't working out. He left the program because I think he wanted more money. So, but they've had some really good senior evaluations. So they'll be looking high and low, and then they'll continue to chip away. Guys like Vodney Cleveland, they're not going to stop recruiting him just because he committed to Texas. They'll keep working on him and see what happens. And then we'll see who shows up at the games. When Byron Lewis, the 4-star running back, showed up at a game late last season, you thought, okay, something's going on here. He'd never talked about Florida, and all of a sudden he showed up. So then that's how the process will work. So they're not done by any stretch.
Before we change topics, Keith, just want to get, what are your thoughts on where this recruiting class is at now? Coming into July, they're at 16 commits. They've had a huge June. They've filled a lot of needs, still some left. Where do you think they stand right now heading into the fall?
Yeah, I mean, they've got quality, they've got quantity, they're filling a lot of their needs. I guess the one thing that's sort of lacking is real star power. There aren't any 5 stars, there aren't any top 50 recruits. In fact, right now in the On3 industry rankings, there are 0 top 100 recruits committed to Florida. So that's something Florida fans are obviously used to seeing, but that doesn't mean these guys won't end up in the top 100. Recruiting is a fluid, recruiting's fluid, yes, but recruiting evaluations and rankings are also fluid.
Correct.
And so how these guys perform, will determine whether they move up or not. There are players committed to Florida, Kendall Guervil, CJ Bronall, the 4-star cornerback, guys like that we think certainly have top 100% potential. So for Florida's class to kind of push inside the top 10, they're probably going to need a few more big names. They're going to need some top 100, top 50 type guys. And so there's a lot of work left to be done. And I think there's a big belief, and we knew this last year, Zach. They thought if they could have a strong season that they could finish strong. And they didn't have this many commits last year at this time. They didn't have anywhere near this. They didn't have anywhere near a top 15 ranking. They finished strong. There was a lot of Florida buzz. And then they finished strong on the recruiting trail as well. And they're thinking maybe they can do the same thing this year. So starting from a much better spot, obviously.
Yeah.
So there's going to be guys. They're going to keep chipping away on guys. There's going to be guys emerging that we're not even talking about now.
There'll be some flips.
They're flips. That's right. They're going to have to hold on to guys, obviously.
Yeah.
It goes both ways. But I think they're in a much stronger position than they were a year ago. You got a quarterback committed. You got one of your top running back targets committed. You got 5 offensive linemen committed. And Florida thinks those guys are all climbers. Even Javari Lucas, who's the lowest rated guy, he just turned 17, I believe, or 16. He's a young guy. So, he may not surge in the rankings, but some of the other guys might. Chancellor Campbell, Florida believes, has all conference ability. He's a 3-star offensive tackle, but he had a lot of big boys after him, so he could rise up in the rankings. So they're in a very good spot. Not every single position. You got 2 cornerbacks now committed. How huge is that? You've got, like I said, all the offensive line. You got 2 receivers committed. So you're piecing together a strong class. I think they're in a good spot.
Gun to your head, Keith, who would be some of the highly ranked guys that you think they could still add right now?
Well, again, as we record this, Malik Morris is a 4-star linebacker from Lakeland. DQ Forpka is a 4-star linebacker from.
I mean, in that top 100 range.
Oh, in the top 100 range. Oh, I got to look at the top 100. Let me hold on a second here.
Because that's kind of what they're going to need, like you said, to get over the hump in the recruiting.
Well, let me take a look at the top 100 really quick, because you got to look at it to know who's in it first. So let me just scan through here, Zach. Let's see. Who are we looking for here? This should not take long. Like, yeah, I can BS with the
I'm
best
putting Keith on the spot, ladies and gentlemen.
You know, I'm looking at this and I'm looking at, okay, Jake Krull is an edge, a 4-star edge from IMG Academy. He's from Orlando, but plays at IMG Academy. He's number 37 in the country, probably a Florida-Oklahoma battle. So you're keeping an eye on him. We don't think he's going to have a decision until maybe the fall. 40 at number 46, Chauncey Kennan is a 4-star cornerback from Sarasota Booker, probably trending to FSU right now, Zach. But Florida has a high value for him too. And even though Florida has 2 cornerbacks committed, he's probably a guy that you would continue to recruit. You know what I mean? Because he's that good.
Isaiah Williams, obviously.
Correct. Isaiah Williams at number 50, currently a 4-star linebacker, currently committed to Ole Miss. Florida's still working on him, and there's some feeling that maybe at the end of the day they could get him. And here's a really big one. Number 48 in the country, Davian Gross is a 4-star receiver out of Texas. Florida, he officially visited Florida, heavily involved. Oklahoma, heavily involved. Baylor, of all people, may be the favorite. And Zach, you know who Baylor's receivers coach is?
Dallas Dallas Baker, baby.
That's right. And so there are some guys out there.
I will say, Keith, and I mentioned this in the war room, and we'll talk about that more in a second, but I've heard that Gross might be the receiver that Florida wants the most still on the board.
Oh, I believe that. I mean, I like Sedarian Morgan committed to Alabama on Thursday. Big target, 6'3", 225, big physical, kind of a Jeremiah Smith type build. Florida liked him a lot. We heard the NIL deal was strong for him. He ultimately chose Alabama, but Gross, yes, absolutely. And he can play DB. I mean, this guy can do a lot of different things, and they think he's a special talent that they have in like that highest elite type category. So they're still involved with a lot of guys. I mean, we just named a half dozen of them in the top 50. Trent Henderson, 4-star edge, just committed to LSU. But if you're Florida and you really like somebody, you're not going to stop recruiting them. We saw this last year. This staff believes that they're going to put a good product on the field. They believe that if they put a good product on the field, they can get kids to visit for the marquee games. And there's something about that game day experience at the Swamp. They have confidence that their NIL situation will be strong. So, hey, look, you may have committed to another school today, but my program, if I'm Billy Napier, if we like you, we're going to keep recruiting you. We're going to make you, sometimes it's, how do I put this? The school you committed to, if they're not showing you, they may not be showing you as much love in the fall as a school that's pursuing you. You know what I mean? And so they proved last year they would go out. Look, they got Drake Stubbs from Miami. They got, and this was a big one, Byron Lewis, the 4-star running back from FSU. They flipped TJ Dice, the 4-star offensive tackle from Auburn.
Lagonza
Hayward from Tennessee. How about this one? Ty Jackson, future All-SEC linebacker for Florida. Got him from USC, the Trojans. And so, again, those are schools that you wouldn't say USC's got a poor NIL situation. You wouldn't say Auburn's got a poor NIL situation. You wouldn't say Miami's got a poor NIL situation. And Florida went and got all those guys. So there's a real belief that they can do it again. But the difference now is they're starting from a better position right now than they were a year ago at this time. So there's a lot of buzz about Florida right now. They just got to go out and get some of these bigger name guys, and I think they'll probably get a few. And then obviously we think some of their guys are going to move up in the rankings.
No doubt. Well, let's jump to an ad read real quick.
Yes.
And then we'll change gears for you guys. Great stuff from Keith there. And you can also get some great stuff from Rhoback. There's only one way to describe Rhoback, and that's the best fit, best feel. For those who aren't familiar with Rhoback, they've completely changed the game with their incredibly comfortable activewear. Rhoback has released many items with their newly licensed game day collection, and it's fantastic. Novel polo designs and clean hoodie and Q-zip designs from some of your favorite schools, including the Florida Gators. Nobody on the market is pairing these level of custom designs with this quality of activewear. Rhoback has also proudly been leading the NIL charge, having signed partnerships with multiple college stars, past and present, and are becoming the go-to brand for college athletes across the country. Use the code Gators20 on Rhoback.com for a generous 20% off all new customers. That's spelled RHOBACK.com for 20% off all performance polos, shorts, and more with the code Gators20.
All right, Zach. So let's see. I guess it was, I'm trying to think. Was it last weekend?
June 21st is my birthday.
June 21st. Okay. I can't even get my days mixed up. I got to go see Anthony Richardson's local camp at Citizens Field. By the way, Citizens Field is a bigger dump than it's ever been. And I will say this: I was talking to people in Anthony Richardson's camp, and he had a free camp for young kids, and it was packed, and it was great. Again, free. They got Indianapolis Colts backpacks. They got Anthony Richardson camp T-shirts. It was hot. They used to have a saying on the cups at that bar in Midtown: "Hot as." Yeah. And the place was called Balls, so I'll let you figure that out. But it was hot, all right? But Anthony Richardson, to his credit, put on this camp and did a great job. And he really interacts with people. Look, this guy's a nice dude, man. I'm sorry. I know people love to criticize him. And, the football part hasn't matched up with the ability yet at the NFL level. But this guy's a good dude, a wonderful dude. So I got to spend some time with him. And also he had some Gator players out there. Zach, some Gator players helping out. LJ McCray, one, a big edge. Cameron James, the other edge. And then George Gums, who, man, George Gums looks like a seventh-year NFL vet right now. This guy's a freak of nature, okay?
What a find from the portal, man. Good Lord.
And how about, to Florida's credit, yes, how about Cincinnati, though? Because that's who they basically flipped him from, to get him from Northern Illinois. One-time walk-on receiver, turned tight end, turn edge, turn potential high-round draft pick. Zach, and we're just going to talk about this camp a little bit. I'm going on and on today, forgive me. But I always talk about, and I know people, how different players looked in the 80s and 90s than they do now. When they look like power lifters. They just did. They were bigger. They were bigger guys, not size-wise, not height and weight, but in terms of musculature. He looks like a Javon Curse. He looks like a Lewis Oliver. Okay, this guy looks like he's different, man. He is just different. I put up some photos on our message board. And by the way, Zach, the word is that they feel like, and we're going to post some more stuff at Gators Online, that Florida thinks that he's primed for a big season. I know you've written this, coming off 5.5 sacks, going to be the starter. He's
killing it in summer workouts. They love the guy.
Yeah.
And he'll get to focus on that jack outside linebacker spot this year. He was kind of playing different positions and showing that flexibility in his first year with Florida. But having him, LJ McCray, like what a 1-2 punch at that jack spot, man. Holy crap.
So what I would say is I get to watch you're getting all the word on the summer workouts. I just got to eyeball them physically. So that's what I'm going to concentrate on here. LJ McCray in high school had the frame, right? There's no question about 6'5", 6'6", was 250, 260 pounds. He looks different from when he arrived at Florida a year and a half ago. And that's what you want to hear if you're a Florida fan. He didn't look bad in high school, but he had some baby fat. He was a specimen in terms of height and weight, not in what the body looked
physique,
like.
Yeah.
That's right. He looks like a different guy now. And what we can tell you is he's actually, Zach, you're going to love this. He's out there boxing. He's training. He's doing boxing, a lot of boxing to really build his cardio, his endurance. And, if you're an edge,
he's got to be more athletic.
Correct. He's working on endurance. He's working on agility and flexibility. And those are the types of things, man, when you got to have LJ McCray get into the quarterback in that fourth quarter against Alabama, right?
Yeah.
You're not winning those games if you don't get off the field during those big plays. So he has been smart enough to recognize where he needs to improve. And apparently he's kicking tail in these off seasons.
Literally.
Yeah. I wouldn't want to box him, man. Imagine his reach. Good Lord. Cameron James is another one. Nobody, Zach, is talking about this guy because, correct me if I'm wrong, he's behind Tyreek Sapp.
Yeah.
At the F position, which is one of the two edge positions. Again, another guy, I thought he was going to be like an inside guy coming out of high school. He's sort of gone in the opposite direction. He looks lean and muscular, and he looks like a different dude. But whereas LJ McCray has bulked up with muscle, I think it feels like Cameron James has sort of gone in the other direction with muscle. He is It looked leaned out. He's got that long reach, and people close to him have told us, or not close to him, people with knowledge of his situation think, don't be surprised if Cameron James is a guy that has some eye-opening statistics this year. Again,
remember, he started over Sapp the first 4 games of the season, and then they made the change.
It's funny. Our buddy Kevin Carter, the Gators All-American, he went and saw a practice last year, and he was a guy that Cameron James is a guy that Kevin Carter pointed out and said, that guy's got NFL ability from watching him at practice. And, I think sometimes, and I hate when we talk like this because it's going to sound like I know something, I'm smarter than fans, and that's not what I'm saying at all. But a lot of times people are like, why isn't this guy in the field? Well, it's because on the defensive line in the edge, you always have to have a rotation. Those guys have to be fresh. I mean, offensive line, you kind of want those guys out there all game, building that continuity. Defensive line, it's the opposite. And so Cameron James, even though Tyreek Sapp goes in as the projected starter and a potential first-round pick and all that stuff, the guy getting all the accolades, they're going to need him, Zach. I mean, right? I mean,
100%. They might play close to the same amount of snaps every game.
It's funny. Go ahead.
I mean, they have to have that rotation, like you said, and they got it too. You also got to play all of them to keep them happy.
Well, you look back to the edge position last year, and I didn't realize this until Searcy left and Jack Pyburn left. Those two and George Gums essentially had the same amount of snaps. 3 guys playing the bulk of the time at the same position. So that rotation is something you want to have 8, 10 or more guys that you're flying in and out of there. Because again, what was one of the issues, not last year, but the year before and the season before that, second half performances, right? And they got better last year. LSU, Ole Miss, FSU was a fight until the second half. Tulane was maybe 6-0 at the half, Zach, before Florida took control of the game. And so we started to see a little bit more of that last season. And now you think, can you continue that? And obviously we talked about D-line depth earlier in the show, but at edge, Gums gives you a guy. LJ McCray at that same spot gives you a guy. Jaden Woods, the true freshman, gives you a guy. Kofi Asari, the transfer from UMass, gives you a guy. And then at the F, you've got 2 proven guys, like we said, in Cameron James and Tariq Sapp. So I just wanted to pass along that those guys look great physically, and I wouldn't say that otherwise because I sit out in the front of the building all the time. That's kind of been one of my concerns the last couple of years. I didn't know that the guys were looking like they should, and they do now. And I think and not just those guys. Fletcher Westfall. I've seen a lot of those guys walk in that building, and they look different. Okay, they look.
Shout out to Tyler Miles.
Correct. I don't know, Tyler. You do, but they're doing something where the guys look bigger and stronger, and then we know from testing that they're getting faster too. One other thing I wanted to point out, I got some time with Anthony Richardson, and we talked about DJ Lagway, me, him, and a couple other reporters. I want to be fair to those guys too. He loves DJ Lagway. He's been incredibly impressed with Lagway's mind. He said, look, he's got all the skills. We've now had multiple people tell us they believe Lagway already has NFL, like he's got more ability than a lot of guys already playing in the NFL. But what impressed Anthony Richardson most is his mindset. He says, when he contacts me, it's always, how can I learn more? How can I get better? And just the fact that he was also in fact impressed by the fact that DJ hasn't been fazed by the spotlight.
Sure.
And so this is a guy in the NFL dealing with some of these same things, that spotlight,
no doubt,
recognizing that DJ Lagway is handling it great. So wanted to pass that along.
And he talked about Billy too, right? And where he thinks the program is trending.
He did. Now, he said, look, I mean, this guy kind of, what's that, the line in the, at the end of Shawshank Redemption, Andy Dufresne had to crawl through the tunnel for a mile to get to the, that's sort of what, Billy had to deal with a lot, but he said that this guy doesn't let outside, Anthony Richardson talking about Billy Napier. Billy Napier doesn't let outside things distract him. He's all about his players and his staff and making the team better, and that he always felt like they could get through this thing. They just needed to. Sometimes it does just come down to making 2 or 3 plays here or there, Zach.
And having some success.
They weren't making those plays the first couple of years. They started to make those plays last year. Look, the LSU and Ole Miss games were games that probably would have been lost the 2 previous seasons. A play here, a play there, and Florida found a way to win. There's that old saying, first you lose big, then you lose close, then you win close, then you win big. Florida started to win close last year. The next step, we'll see. But he has a lot of belief in Billy Napier and DJ Lagway, like we said. So he's excited. He also praised the receivers, said, I like to be throwing to those boys. So he really likes that group too. He's keeping an eye on things. That's kind of cool. He's got a lot of pressure up there in Indianapolis. He's got a lot of pressure, but he's still from Gainesville, still loves the Gators, still keeping one eye on UF, and he's happy with the direction that he thinks the program is headed in. And I think that's a nice thing.
No doubt. Well, shout out to AR. Really appreciate him doing that for the city of Gainesville. And look, a lot of these guys have these camps, Keith, and they don't make them free. So for him to make them free, he knows what kids in Gainesville, especially on the east side of town, how hard it is to pay for something like that, and to put his time out there. I can't salute the guy enough, because he grew up on that side of town and he knows how much that means to those kids.
And he stayed there a long time afterwards, talking to people, signing autographs, was gracious with people like me. I've been interviewing him since he was 15, 16 years old, but he's just a good dude, like I said. So anyway, all right.
Well, from one quarterback to another,
Yes.
We've been all over this DJ Lagway story this offseason. Keith first reported when he resumed throwing. We've talked to his dad. We've talked to his agent. We got more people that we're going to talk to on this coming up this month. But we did put out some of the latest intel that we were hearing in our war room this week at Gators Online, and we'll get to some more intel that came out of that. But Keith, we got to talk about this because, we like to be out in front when we can. And I think it's important, as we wrote in that story, that as much excitement as a lot of fans have had this offseason about Lagway resuming throwing and some of the videos that have come out, it's important for us to note, just based on our reporting, that he's not out of the woods yet.
Yeah.
And there's still some hurdles that he has to climb moving forward.
Yeah, I mean, the latest that we know, I mean, again, we're not out there at his workouts, okay?
Yeah.
But that he's not quite at 100%. And that's okay. That I was told this week, and I know you've been told similar things, that there's a plan, right? Doctors internally, they didn't just go to one doctor. They've got a team of people.
Yeah.
They've worked with some trainers in Jacksonville that work with quarterbacks that are recovering from injuries. So they're working with a multitude of people, and they've developed this plan, and he's sticking to the plan. And we're told, yes, there are setbacks, but there's also days where he makes more progress than it was anticipated.
Sure.
But you're right, not out of the woods, got a ways to go. But there internally in his camp, there's a belief that it's progressing the way it should. Now, again, we'll see. That doesn't guarantee anything. But right now, not 100%. The hope is he will be sometime in the near future. I think that's the way to put it.
In addition to his camp too, Keith, I think that the Florida coaching staff has been saying the right things. This is where his recovery process is at, and the things that he's doing was all part of the plan. And Napier has said that he's on schedule in terms of trying to get ready for the season. I just, when you hear some of the comments from Napier and some of the others, it can easily put you at ease and think that he's fine. And I just think it's important for us to point out that he's not there yet. I think that there is confidence and hope that he will get there, but we won't know, and nor will he and the staff and his camp, until they actually get out there on the practice field. Once he starts going through multiple practices and training camp and throwing at a high rate, and not having his shoulder flare up or any pain or discomfort, when he can get over that hurdle, that's one box that you can check, that he's practicing and nothing's showing up. And then obviously it's once he gets into the game and starts to take some hits and show that he can hold up for 4 quarters. And if he can get over those 2 hurdles, Keith, and not have any setbacks, then I think everybody can breathe a sigh of relief and feel like, okay, he's got to where he needs to go. But there are still steps to get to that point.
We should point out, he was not 100% during much of that brilliant run last year. Statistically, it was 12 TDs, 9 interceptions. Statistically, it didn't, but it was what you saw with your eyes: the leadership, the poise, the deep throws. He's just a gamer. The big plays when you needed him, and he would have to, according to people close to him, some of the shorter throws, he excelled at the long throws, Zach. The shorter throws sometimes were where he experienced some struggles. And we were told that one of the reasons for that was because he wasn't feeling 100%, he would kind of, overcompensate. Yeah, exactly. Make up for it with another part of your body and all that. Like when you're walking and one foot hurts, you put all the pressure on the other foot, and then by the end of the walk, that foot hurts.
Well, not to mention he had the hamstring, and so he's dealing with the shoulder and the hamstring, and he was overcompensating a lot.
Yeah, played injured. I mean, the guy's a leader, so we know that. We know he's got that. I guess the question would be, is the loss of developmental time. He was out there in the spring. He wasn't throwing, but he would be behind the quarterbacks in practice. And you saw it, Zach, you were out there every time. He would be mimicking the plays and the throws. So even though he wasn't throwing the ball, he was seeing everything. And to me, obviously that's where he has to grow as a quarterback. He's got all the tools. The growth of a quarterback of his level is to figure things out and have everything slow down and understand coverages and all that, everything that's being thrown at you and where your guys need to be in this situation and that coverage and that protection and all that stuff. So as long as that stuff, and I'm sure he's in the film room all the time. They always have said one of the first guys to get there, one of the last guys to leave, but you still got to get out there and do it. You still got to get out there, like you said.
Sure.
How did your body react that first time you're hit, all that. So
so we'll see where it goes. Obviously, we're going to learn a lot once we get to fall camp, and we'll see if DJ makes a trip to SEC Media Days. That'll be interesting, Keith, because if he does, man, he ain't going to hear the end of that.
Yeah. Well,
they might not bring him just because of that.
Yeah, and look, I mean, there's a reason why they're not giving daily updates on him, because it would be like this. That's what a recovery process is.
Yeah.
You follow the trend, not every hour, right?
Correct.
And just like we do in recruiting, you can get caught up following the hour by hour recruiting, blow by blow in recruiting.
Yes,
you really just look at what's the trend of the recruitment. The same thing here.
Okay, well, let's get to our last ad read, and then we'll hit you guys with a couple topics before we get out of here. I want to give a shout out to myperfectfranchise.net. And Andy is a big baseball fan, and from his line of work, he's seen firsthand the fantastic trait that baseball players bring to the franchise world. And he's offering a donation of $500 to $1,000 to Florida's Baseball NIL Collective if anyone from our site purchases a franchise through myperfectfranchise.net. We think it's a cool opportunity to help the baseball program. Now is the perfect time to contact Andy to learn more. His services are 100% free, and he's here to help. If you have any questions about business ownership, head to myperfectfranchise.net to learn more, or you can call or text Andy anytime at 404-973-9901. All
right. What do we got next here?
Let's not give them all the juice, Keith, but what other nuggets you want to give out here to maybe encourage them to go read the full
report? Well, I think we talked about a lot of it earlier with the Gums.
Sure.
LJ, Craig Cameron, James. But here's something that people would be excited about. We put this on our message board a while ago, but freshman receiver, I get the hiccups all of a sudden, Zach. Freshman receiver, I can't even talk. Freshman receiver Dallas Wilson. So people cannot get enough on this guy, right? I mean, superstar in the spring game, 5-star guy, flipped from Oregon or signed with Oregon, never made it there. He got to Florida in January, late January, weighed about 190 pounds. He's up to 215.
Gosh.
All right? He's up to 215 pounds. Remember, he is very fast. He's a guy that was running very good times in high school, ran the 100, I want to say under 11 seconds, which is good for a big, tall receiver. So at 6'2.5", he's now 215 pounds of added muscle. Looks great physically. I've seen him on campus a few times. Great kid, always comes up, talks to us when we're sitting out there sweating to death in front of the football building. And I know Florida's really excited about him. And look, one of the questions was with a young receiver, are they going to be – it's not just running routes and catching the ball. Can a guy be physically ready for the SEC? You're going to take hits. But beyond that, you've got to block in the Florida offense, plain and simple. In high school, he was an excellent blocker, but the cornerbacks were usually my size and your size, Zach, okay?
Yeah.
Not exactly these big SEC dudes. So he had to get prepared for the life in the SEC. He's added bulk, he's added muscle and strength, and he's already an outstanding blocker. And he plays with a chip on his shoulder on the edge. I think there are going to be games this year. I'm just telling you, Zach, do not be surprised if Dallas Wilson is involved in a pancake or two. I think he's a physical type dude, okay? And this will serve him well. It'll endear him to the running backs and the offensive line, I can tell you that as well, beyond helping spring longer plays for the backs. So
I miss the chop blocks. he could throw one of those now.
Dallas Wilson's a dude, man. He's working his tail off, and that was never a question. He didn't have an easy upbringing in Tampa, so a lot of people thought that once he got to college and settled into the college life, it would be beneficial to him once he was in a regimen of a program, and that appears to have happened. So hopefully he can stay on this path.
Well, our war room also includes notes about the backup quarterback situation. It includes a couple notes about the defensive line, including one guy who is working to play nose tackle a little bit more this year. So I encourage you guys to go check those out. One note that I do want to talk about here on the show that I also followed up on the message board with, and that's about Jeremiah McLeod. Obviously, we've talked about the D-line. We led the show with it. It is such an important position of need for the Gators because of the recent attrition. And one thing that we've learned through this offseason is that the staff is very high on Jeremiah McLeod. This is a guy who was a 3-star defensive lineman, but he is not a 3-star player. Florida had to go head-to-head for Georgia with this guy. Keith talked earlier about it's about who you beat. Well, this is a guy that's from the Peach State. There were some predictions right before signing day that he was going to flip to Georgia. I mean, Florida had to fight to keep this guy. And the early returns are looking like it was well worth the effort because he impressed in spring camp. He's continued to impress in summer workouts. And because of obviously some attrition, Keith, he's in a position now where he has put himself in a position to play as a true freshman, which is super hard to do on the defensive line. But the opportunity is there. And Keith, it sounds like the ability is there.
Yeah, coming out of high school, there were I think the big concern was that the high school coaches wanted to see more consistent effort from him, and they got it. And he helped lead his team to, I believe, the state championship game in Georgia in a high classification, played at Lee County. If you don't know Lee County, it's just north of Albany, and it is a hell of a program. And I think Dean Fabrizio is the coach, and he was one of the, Jeremiah McLeod he was one of the star players on that team, and he really took his game to the next level. Interesting thing about Jeremiah, Zach, is I remember the first time I saw him, I wasn't like blown away by his physique. And we talk about piece of clay a lot. But looking back, I remember covering a Bucks game years ago. I don't know if you remember. There was a game where Warren Sapp had the illegal block on the kid from Green Bay and put him in the hospital. That's the game I was at. And I remember interviewing Warren Sapp after the game, and he's like, I don't really care about that guy. I can care less. You don't care that he's in the hospital? Nope. But anyway, when you saw Warren Sapp in the locker room, look, Kevin Carter looked like Mr. Olympia, right? Javon Curse looked like Mr. Olympia. Warren Sapp didn't. Warren Sapp's maybe one of the 3 or 4 best defensive tackles in NFL history, right? So Jeremiah McLeod isn't going to blow you away with his physical stature or musculature and all that, but he just plays. He's got the quick twitch. He's got the natural strength. And now he's in a weight program. And by the way, he looks different than when he arrived on campus.
Correct.
So this is a guy with a lot of ability, reshaping his body every day. And he plays with a chip on his shoulder. Now, we always joke in the recruiting business that the kids that message you the most asking about their rankings never pan out. He was a guy that, quite frankly, would message us all the time. Why aren't I a 4-star?
I was going to say, I misspoke. He actually ended up a 4-star. He was a 3-star. He did end up.
He got moved up. But he also went out and didn't just complain about his ranking. He did something about it. He went out and kicked ass. Okay. That's how you get your ranking moved up. Okay. So he wasn't begging. He was, why am I not up? Why am I not up? He went out, he performed, he moved up in the rankings. And obviously, you're right. Florida did hold off Georgia for him at the end. And he always felt comfortable in Gainesville. And one other thing, I want to say this, how is he fitting into the locker room? These are important questions that we don't sometimes, it's sometimes hard for reporters to get that info. Well, 2 freshmen in his class came up and talked to Blake Alderman and I a couple weeks ago, Nashawn Montgomery and our guy, Vernell Brown III, 2 of our favorites. And I said, I just wanted to know, who's the funniest guy in the class? It's got to be Dallas Wilson, right? Because that is one funny dude, all right?
Yeah, you saw him giving crap to EA for his face.
That's right. And they both said, no, it's Jeremiah McLeod. Wow. And when your teammates are saying you're a funny guy, that's what they're saying is they like you. They like the guy. Yeah. He's endeared himself to these other guys.
That's right.
And I think that's important too. This is a tight-knit group, the freshman class. And I think we're going to see a lot of things. Jeremiah McLeod isn't 6'5", 350 pounds. He would be more of the regular defensive tackle.
Correct, the end guy, yeah.
Body-wise. However, if you don't have that 400-pound guy like Desmond Watson or 380-pound guy like Cam Jackson, I'm getting the names right, yeah. You do with what you got, right?
That's right.
And where those guys would hold blocks, maybe these guys are more penetrator types. I don't know what Ron Roberts has planned. He's a lot smarter than we are. But Jeremiah McLeod's got a lot of ability, and he really impressed. I said a lot to not say a lot, but he really impressed people with his will and desire. And he was kind of seen, if we're going to be totally honest, some people thought he was a little bit of a teenage knucklehead for a while. And he went out and he impressed everybody that senior year. And I think that's carried over into what he's done at Florida. So tip of the cap to him.
For sure, man. Looking forward to seeing what he can do this year. Before we get out of here, do want to mention that we got some actual dates for Florida's non-conference schedule. We already knew their conference opponents. Those dates haven't been set yet, but we now know Florida's non-conference schedule in full. We had already learned some dates and some marquee matchups for some neutral site games. Keith and I will be at some of them, but we now learn their full home schedule, which isn't too great. The SEC schedule at home is fantastic, but Florida will have its first home opener November 6th against North Florida after they open in Vegas, and then obviously to play Florida State November 11th. But some big-time matchups here, Keith.
Yeah, I mean, you love the schedule, the non-conference schedule, because you're playing Arizona, you're playing UConn, you're playing Duke, and I think there's a couple other pretty good ones too. But you wish, as a Florida fan, that there would be a Duke coming to the O-Dome or an Arizona coming to the – so that's kind of the one thing that's missing, and I'm sure that'll be addressed next year. Because, Zach, what happens is when you win, ticket prices obviously don't stay the same, right?
That's
so,
right.
So the SEC schedule is going to be great. So in totality, the home schedule is still going to be awesome. But that's kind of the one. If there was one thing you would critique it with, you'd say, okay, how do we get more of these marquee games at home? But look, UConn is the program of the century so far, and then after their 6 championships or 5 championships, whatever it is, the next highest number is 3-1. North Carolina, Duke, and Florida and Duke are playing each other.
That's
Arizona's a marquee program. That guy's a great coach, and
LeBron James' son's going to be making his debut in that game.
Yeah, and it's in Vegas. I mean, they're going to be in the limelight. I'll tell you another thing I like, Zach. I love that Florida has continued this, and credit to Scott Strickland, of playing around the state of Florida. You know what I mean? Because a lot of people, we take for granted, you live near Gainesville. I get free passes to go to the games. But if you live in Fort Lauderdale, Miami, it's a little harder for you to get to a game.
That's right.
If you live in Jacksonville and you work 7 days a week, you may not be able to get to a game. And so they've done a great job of and that's great for branding for Florida, becoming the school in the state of Florida, right?
Yeah, going to that Orange Bowl Classic in Sunrise, Florida.
Let me take that back. Gator fans would say they've always been the school in Florida, so I want to correct that. But that's great that they do that. I love the schedule. I don't know your general thoughts.
Yeah, no, I mean, first of all, I love the fact that they took on some of these non-conference opponents and some of these matchups. When you win the national championship, you get invited to games like this. And maybe that would have led to Florida having another potential big-time non-conference opponent at home had they not been going to these neutral site matchups. But it is what it is. I think Florida fans aren't going to be upset by some of these games that take place. I will encourage Florida fans, though, go and check out the team early in the season when they play North Florida, Florida State, and Merrimack at home, because after November 21st and Thanksgiving break, it's going to be almost a whole month before the Gators play in the O-Dome again. They go from November 21st to December 17th in between home games. Everything in between that is that Thanksgiving tournament, ACC, SEC Challenge, the Jimmy V Classic, and the Orange Bowl Classic. So some big-time matchups. I can't wait for this year, Keith. Between football and basketball, man, it's a lot to look forward to.
Well, just so everybody knows, Zach and I plan on going to the UConn game at Madison Square Garden, and Zach's going to obviously be in Durham. We'll see if I can if I can somehow slide my way into that. Zach may.
We got to see what the football team's doing too.
Yeah,
that's going to determine a lot of what we do.
For all I know, Zach might have me sleeping out in one of those tents in Krzyzewskiville at Duke just to be able to ride along with it. But no, it's exciting. People are talking about basketball. We're writing summer basketball stories, and that used to not really be a thing, and it's just unlimited hoops right now. Anyway, Zach, About ready to wrap it up here. Happy
You
4th
are,
of July.
man. We got through another one. I was off last week, so
That's
I miss you guys.
Happy 4th of July.
Keith to get some PTO coming up.
That's right. Happy 4th of July to everybody. If you like what we're doing, hit the like button, hit the subscribe button down below, leave a comment, but really make sure you go to GatorsOnline.com. We had an exciting week. Rivals was purchased by On3 a while back, and the merger took place this week. So we've got a lot of new subscribers coming over from Rivals. They've been fantastic. It's been fun to watch all this transpire, but we've got a lot of juice as always, a lot of recruiting coverage, a lot of team intel at GatorsOnline.com. So again, happy 4th of July to everybody. For Zach Albaverdi, I am Keith Bieber. This was the Gators Online Show. Have a safe holiday weekend. Take care, everybody.